This is a story for anyone who may one day have to care for a loved one or need care themselves. If you think you've got all your affairs in order, think again. Tonight, Contact 13 Chief Investigator Darcy Spears shines a spotlight on a system some say is tearing families apart.
Terry Black always planned to be there for her father, Del Mancarelli. Little did she know she and her husband would have to fight to care for Del.
This has been one of the most difficult experiences of my life.
That's saying a lot for someone who lost her mother to a brain tumor. Knowing that tragedy can strike at any time, they began to put Dad's estate in order.
He put me on all of his bank accounts, made me the executrix of his will.
But it turned out that wouldn't be enough. Family Court Judge Charles Hoskin explains the wording many people don't know they need.
That they put an estate plan in place or designate that if I'm in need of a guardian, this is who I'd like to have done.
Del's journey into guardianship began when he moved to Las Vegas in 2002 to live with his longtime companion, Helen Natko. Years later, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and his health took a turn for the worse. In 2013, Terry noticed several withdrawals from his account, adding up to $220,000.
You know, something did not look right. My dad did not write checks for $50,000.
They flew in from their home state of North Carolina to help, only to find themselves shut out by Helen.
And she just said, "You're not going to see him. He's staying here."
The Blacks tried calling police, but learned they'd have to apply for guardianship of Del through the courts.
If it's believed that you are no longer capable of caring for yourself physically or financially, a family court judge can declare you a ward of the state and appoint a guardian who gets control over every aspect of your life, including your money.
People who are wards of the state have fewer rights and access to fewer resources than prisoners who are convicted of the most heinous crimes.
Attorney Rob Graham specializes in estate and guardianship cases. He argues the system intended to protect people puts them in a very vulnerable position.
Is there too much power floating around here being given to guardians that can come in and take complete control of your life, your money, your choices?
Too much power. There's sufficient power, hopefully.
The Blacks feel powerless in Del's case, particularly because Nevada has a home state rule, meaning you can't apply to be someone's guardian if you don't live in Nevada.
It's very difficult to manage somebody's affairs from a distance.
They sought local help, but Del's companion Helen filed for guardianship too, so the court appointed a temporary guardian who took control of Del's estate.
That the court that you think is there to protect you, to protect your loved one, it's called family court. The court completely denied our family any rights.
We're trying to protect the ward. And a lot of times that's going to cause someone else in that spectrum to feel like they weren't dealt with correctly.
The Blacks sure do. Terry even had to ask permission from the court-appointed guardian for something as basic as dinner alone with her dad.
And I was told, you will not be able to remove your dad from the home and take him to dinner.
Terry and Rick say that began a campaign to discredit them, isolate Del, and rack up charges to his estate. Under state law, the court-appointed guardian is paid with the ward's money. Every time Terry called or emailed for any reason, her father was billed as the system drained Del's money to fight his own daughter.
It's difficult, and I think that ultimately the process is too expensive.
But here's the kicker in Del's case.
There was criminal action here presented to the family court that they ignored.
Remember all the money withdrawn from Del's bank? The Blacks reported that to authorities who investigated and criminally charged Helen Natko with felony exploitation, alleging she took tens of thousands of dollars from Del for her own use. Natko has not entered a plea. The Blacks provided evidence she lost thousands of dollars gambling and told the family court she was under criminal investigation. Despite that, the court gave guardianship over Del to Helen. And that hasn't changed even though she's been charged. While many say that makes it clear the system is broken, Judge Hoskin argues.
I have 8,500 active guardianship cases, and I only have a very few that are disgruntled. And I think that's a very positive spin on what's going on in our system.
We reached out to Helen Natko and her attorney, but both declined to go on camera. They pointed to the family court's final decision, which found Dell too medically fragile to move. And despite the pending criminal case, family court didn't find any evidence that money was misused. Darcy Spears, Channel 13, Action News.
Mistake, misunderstanding, or intention to mislead, no matter what, one man's life was dramatically changed forever. Tonight, Contact 13 Chief Investigator Darcy Spears shows us how a system intended to guard and protect could be causing more harm than good.
When you look at Jason Hanson, you might think he can't take care of himself.
Do you video game a lot?
But when you talk to him,
I'm clearly lucid. I'm very intelligent.
you learn otherwise.
Someone needs to speak up. Someone needs to take a stand.
Jason is speaking out about what happened to him in adult guardianship court, a system Contact 13 discovered he never should have been caught up in.
I'm perfectly mentally capable, except for the fact that I have cerebral palsy.
While in the guardianship system, Jason lost his house and was placed in a group home at taxpayers' expense after his father passed away. Jason was involved in a guardianship when he was a child, but court officials say that ended in 2007 when he turned 18. No petition for appointment of an adult guardian has ever been filed, but that didn't keep the court from ruling on his case for most of his adult life.
When Contact 13 started asking questions, the court started admitting errors, like accepting filings after they'd lost jurisdiction, which they call unfortunate. As for treating Jason as an adult ward, they say they don't know whether that was a series of clerical errors or misunderstandings by the attorneys or an intention to mislead the court.
We would prefer not to be involved in people's lives.
Family Court Judge Charles Hoskin.
I can tell you that if a guardianship is not necessary, then it does go out of the system. We do dismiss it.
In Jason's case, no one caught it for 7 years until Contact 13 got involved and the case was suddenly closed. While it was open, private guardian and former Clark County Public Administrator Jared Schaefer was appointed trustee from July 2009 through January 2014. A special needs trust was created so Jason could qualify for Social Security benefits.
I never asked for Jared Schaefer to be appointed. He was court appointed.
Schaefer is currently the subject of a federal lawsuit accusing him of embezzlement, fraud, racketeering, and negligence in another case where he was the guardian. In Jason's case, court documents show Schaefer's company, Professional Fiduciary Services of Nevada, got $3,354 for trustee fees plus $300 for sales expenses. Another $4,000 was charged, again as sales expenses, but with no record of who got the money. The court has no explanation, and they say no one objected at the time.
I feel like there should have been someone fighting for me, and there clearly wasn't.
Contact 13 also found private guardian Patience Bristol billed Jason for case management, nearly $1,000 in 2010. Bristol, who worked for Schaefer's company for years, is currently in prison for stealing over $200,000 from other people she was assigned to protect.
She was vetted. She met the statutory requirements. She understood how to get away for a period of time with what she was doing.
Jason says he tried to fight for the right to fix up his dad's home, pay off a line of credit, and move back in, but he was told that was impossible and never given a chance. Court records show the house was worth $170,000 when his dad died in 2008, but county records show Schaefer sold it for $47,000 in 2010. After fees and expenses, records show as of 2013 only about $6,000 remaining in the trust Schaefer managed for Jason.
Did you get lost in this system, or you think it's more sinister than that?
I don't know if I got lost in the system or if it was more underhanded than that, but the system definitely needs to change.
The Court Compliance Office is taking another look at Jason's case to see whether the orders entered after he turned 18 should be set aside. As for Jared Schaefer, when we contacted him about this case, he referred us to court documents and hung up on us. Darcy Spears, Channel 13, Action News.
The story you're about to see will make you sad. It will make you feel scared and helpless, and it could happen to anyone. It is a family tragedy where an elderly couple is yanked from their home. Their daughter is left in the dark, and the person put in charge by Clark County admits to serious mistakes uncovered by Contact 13 Chief Investigator Darcy Spears.
It can happen in the blink of an eye.
I could not be less happy.
Life as you know it changed forever.
Did you feel like you and your wife were kidnapped out of your own home?
We were kidnapped and raped. Both.
Maybe not literally, but Rudy and Rennie North feel like they were violated, stripped of the life they were living together for 60 years. He cared for her through cancer and claims they were doing just fine until a knock on their door in the fall of 2013.
So I opened the door and they said that they were officers of the court.
Rudy says the officers gave the couple 3 options.
1, we call the police. 2, we have you go to a psychiatric ward.
Choice 3, an assisted living facility. The people who came for Rudy and Rennie were private professional guardian April Parks and a member of her staff.
Mr. and Mrs. North were not in a good situation when we initially got the guardianship. There were lots of concerns about what was going on with them health-wise.
Parks says a hospice company referred the couple to her out of concern that they could no longer care for themselves.
Were they allowed to given the choice to stay in their home?
At that time, they were not.
And they've never been allowed to go back home. Parks says threats of police and jail never came up, but
psychiatric ward probably came up.
Frightened and worried about being separated, the couple went with Parks to Lakeview Terrace Senior Home. Their only daughter, Julie, had no idea they'd been taken.
Who believes they're going to get taken out of their home?
Julie eventually tracked them down. She took this video in January 2014.
Oh, I felt like I was being arrested. I was kidnapped out of my house. I wasn't even fully dressed.
Court records show Rudy and Rennie were deemed incompetent by a pain management specialist and a physician's assistant. April Parks used those evaluations to gain temporary guardianship, which the court has since made permanent.
In the court record, Parks also calls their only daughter, Julie, a reported drug addict who has no contact with her parents. Both say that's a lie, and there's no evidence to back it up.
They defame your family. They do that in case after case after case.
In the North's case, we discovered mistakes, overbilling, and double dipping.
Should it take Contact 13 to be the one that's finding this stuff and asking these questions?
No, ma'am, it shouldn't.
That's scary when you're in charge of someone else's life and money.
Yes, I'm not happy.
This shouldn't be happening.
I agree with you.
Shockingly, Parks sold a bunch of Rudy and Rennie's belongings through an estate sale company who made $4,150, but she only got $923, which went into the North's account. Court records show Parks said it wasn't worth the legal effort to pursue the other $3,200.
But why would that ever be the determination?
Well, I'm not,
this is someone else's money.
You're right.
She says they're going to pursue it now. Contact 13 also uncovered double dipping. Rudy and Rennie were charged $780 each for court filings and travel time to court on the same days in 2013.
That's over $1,500.
You're absolutely right.
To this couple.
You're absolutely right.
Who you're saying doesn't have enough money already.
We will happily reverse those charges out.
How about $108 Parks charged Rennie to buy her a pair of stretch pants?
Does $108 for stretch pants seem
No, it
reasonable?
doesn't. And I'm happy to reverse that.
So far, Parks and her lawyer have charged the couple more than $25,000 in fees, plus almost $50,000 has been spent for the couple's room and board and medical expenses. Parks says this is the first time she's hearing Rudy and Rennie are unhappy and want out.
I was dealing in fear because, again, I didn't know that. I thought Nazi Germany was done in 1946. I didn't know it still existed in America.
April Parks also told us that guardians are officers of the court, but the court says that's not true. The North family is scheduled to bring their case back to court later this month as they fight to reunite and end the guardianship. We will be following that case.
Did a county hearing master spout false information in court to scare a family trying to care for their loved one?
That's what Contact 13 Chief Investigator Darcy Spears is asking, and she is taking her questions all the way to the top.
Each hearing, they ignore my petitions and do absolutely nothing.
Several families feel they're getting run over when trying to protect a loved one. They say hearing master John Norheim is at the wheel.
Guardianship abuse has been going on here for over 20 years. Commissioner Norheim just refined the process.
County commissioners heard concerns and wanted action.
So that maybe we need to move this Norheim. If he's under your control, that might be the first move you make when you leave here this morning.
I think Commissioner Collins is absolutely correct. I would be getting rid of Mr. Nord, whatever, now, and put into effect some individuals that actually will work with the families.
That was 4 weeks ago, and Norheim is still on the bench. We sat down with Chief District Court Judge David Barker to ask why.
What about the calls to remove Norheim?
I understand the calls. I understand the case type. I will make decisions. We will make decisions that are consistent with an efficient operation of the guardianship program.
Contact 13 has seen firsthand how Norheim operates in the case of Del Mancarelli.
I would never do, Your Honor, anything inhumane to my father.
Terry Black is fighting to get her father back to North Carolina. To do that, she planned to transition him through Aegis-assisted living. But listen to this from a hearing last March as Norheim spouts scare tactics about what he says is her and Aegis's plan.
Aegis would send over typically 3 to 4 medical techs, big burly guys. They would go over to Ms. Natko's house. They would subdue your father. That is, they would take him to the ground. They would tie up his hands and his feet. They would inject him with a combination. They call it a B-52. They would then strap him to a gurney, 5-point restraints, including a belly restraint, hands and feet. They would then take him to Aegis, where he would be in a padded cell for a minimum of 3 days, up to a year, until he could be made docile enough to be transported to North Carolina.
This sounds like it's something rehearsed. We never made plans for IVs to be shot in Dad's arm and
strapped to a gurney.
And each time she tried to explain that to Norheim, he steamrolled on and didn't let her talk.
The doctors tell me, all of the doctors tell me this is not medically appropriate, and breaking him by putting him in isolation and chemical restraints.
That is not that is not the plan.
We contacted Aegis, who flat out deny the procedures Norheim described. In fact, it's against state law. Assisted living facilities cannot use chemical or physical restraints or lock a resident in a room.
I am appalled that a commissioner who's assigned to adjudicate on these kind of matters would make that up with no evidence.
We asked Chief Judge Barker to watch the hearing video with us.
Frankly, I'm not going to get down into the case.
He did allow us to read him a transcript.
What you described to me is troubling.
Barker says guardianship cases are very difficult and claims Norheim is trying to do what's best for the wards. As for the facts,
any judicial officer should know of what they speak.
And at this point, are there any plans to do anything differently, or
everything is on the table?
Aegis reached out to Commissioner Norheim to correct his misinformation, but they say he never responded to their letter or multiple phone calls. After our interview with Judge Barker, the court opened its own investigation, and we are awaiting their report. In the newsroom, Darcy Spears, Channel 13 Action News.
I miss him. I miss him immensely.
Terry and her dad, Del, were very close.
And he was in a band? Yes. My dad played the clarinet and the alto saxophone, and there he is right there. Yeah, with the alto sax.
Del passed away July 3rd.
My dad worked at Allegheny Power.
Now, Terry sorts through the few personal belongings she recovered.
Just a simple watch, nothing fancy, but this probably was Dad's favorite watch. And
the family had a simple plan in place. If the time came when Del couldn't take care of himself, Terry would step in, but things didn't work out that way.
If my dad knew how the end story of his life has gone, he would have been horrified. This is not the way he wanted it to be. This is not the way he wanted to live out the remainder of his days.
Nearly 2 years ago, Alzheimer's was taking a toll on Dell's health. Terry and her husband Rick came to Las Vegas to take him home to North Carolina, but Dell's companion Helen Natko resisted, forcing Terry into a drawn-out and very expensive court battle.
That's a hell that no one should ever be put through.
But you don't have a plan for taking your dad.
Hearing Master John Norheim gave guardianship over Dell to Natko, even though she's facing a felony charge of exploitation over money transferred from Dell's accounts. The criminal charge is still pending. As for Dell,
he's gone. I've been wanting to care for him for the 2 years I've been out here in Nevada fighting as a daughter, and now he's gone.
Just recently, Terry had reason to hope she would get to spend more time with her dad.
I'm going to take the step of having Miss Black be co-guardian of...
Contact 13 was there when she won a small victory.
After we started reporting about the guardianship system preventing families from caring for their loved ones, all adult guardianship cases were taken away from Hearing Master Norheim and transferred to Judge Steele. Steele finally granted Terry co-guardianship in June, and she was able to visit her dad in the hospital.
I fed him his dinner. We went dessert first, back to the meal. And I will never forget just holding his hand and feeding him and telling him how much I love him. What a good father he has been to me.
Just one of the precious few memories Terry holds close to her heart of her father's final days.
The newly created panel was formed to help fix a broken system first exposed by Chief Investigator Darcy Spears. Contact 13 was there as things got very heated.
Not the guardians you got to be aware of, it's more family members.
Private professional guardian Jared Schaefer goes head-to-head with families who've accused him and other for-profit guardians of abusing power, exploiting those they're supposed to protect for their own financial gain.
It's what it is. The ward counts. Remember this.
You use the money in their estate to get lawyers to prevent them from being taken. I'm sorry. He started this.
Please don't do that.
I'm sorry.
I would hate.
Schaefer said the system isn't broken. He's pointing the finger back at families, saying they're upset because they didn't get their loved one's money. Elizabeth Indig has been fighting private guardian April Parks for years over a guardianship involving her mother.
Using color of law, she threatened me with prison if I interfered with her, locked me out of the home, took control of the mail, ignored the family trust, and lost, sold, and or stole all of the assets of the trust.
Though emotions and tempers flared, public comment was welcome at today's inaugural commission meeting, presided over by Supreme Court Justice James Hardesty.
As many of you may know, following several news accounts that addressed guardianship proceedings in our state, as well as other information that the Supreme Court has become aware of.
The commission's mission is to look at oversight and accountability within the state's flawed guardianship system and find ways to improve it. Rick Black lost his father-in-law, who died this month after fighting guardianship for nearly 2 years.
We took him home to Pennsylvania, and we buried him beside his wife, Lillian, just this past Saturday. The guardian did not assist in that effort. She did not send condolences. She did not attend the funeral. She called, she said, "Your father has died. Come get him."
The State Guardianship Commission will hold several more meetings to explore the system's shortcomings. They're expected to come up with a final report of recommendations by December. We will be following it every step of the way.
April, it's Darcy Spears from Channel 13. Would you please come out and talk to me?
As of Monday morning,
I know you're in there. Why are you avoiding us?
Private guardian April Parks can no longer avoid accountability over allegations of double dipping, misspent money, and abuse of power.
Police served search warrants here at Parks' home in Boulder City and also at her office on St. Rose Parkway. The law enforcement activity, spearheaded by the Attorney General's office, comes about 5 months after Contact 13 first exposed allegations against Parks for exploiting her wards.
Rudy and Rennie North, Mrs. Elizabeth Indig, Phyllis Moskowitz Crow. They're just a few of the more than 100 people who were made wards of the court with Parks as their guardian. Now, police are looking at what Parks did with their money and assets. Investigators from the Nevada Attorney General, Metro, and Boulder City Police carted out boxes of documents from Parks' office and spoke to her at her home. She spoke to us back in May to address concerns raised by wards and their families.
When I get to that age and somebody tries to put me under a guardianship, I'm probably going to come out kicking and screaming too.
Ever since that interview, Parks has refused to talk.
You can't hide forever.
The joint law enforcement investigation is the first of its kind, and according to affected families, it's long overdue.
When criminal activity is identified in the family court, historically here in Clark County, that's been ignored when it pertains to the private guardians and their lawyers.
But with the service of Monday's warrants, that could be changing. Law enforcement's focus on Parks began in June when Boulder City Police began investigating the disappearance of 8 of Parks' wards. She'd moved them without notice from Lakeview Terrace in Boulder City, leaving a trail of unpaid bills behind. Contact 13 also caught Parks double dipping into the bank accounts of Rudy and Rennie North.
As a responsible steward of their money, you're in charge of every dime these people have in this world.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it acceptable to be consistently making those mistakes with someone else's money?
No, it's not.
And I just crocheted.
Just last week, we told the story of Phyllis Moskowitz Crow, who was left destitute and almost lost her home after Parks became her guardian.
She is so evil and so vicious, even the devil wouldn't have her in his zone.
Elizabeth Indig's mother did lose her home after Parks let it slip into foreclosure. It was sold for pennies on the dollar, and then Parks sold most of Mrs. Indig's clothing and belongings.
My mom is now sentenced to a life in a nursing home when we had a trust and we had made plans to keep her in her own home with all of her things until she died.
We've asked the court what will become of all the people Parks has guardianship over now that police have seized her files, paperwork, and computer equipment. We're still waiting on a response, and we, of course, will stay on top of this story as it develops.
Hello. How are you? It's ironic meeting Bill and Kathy Meslow at the Boulder City Library. When we interviewed them, the couple couldn't even get a library card because they couldn't prove who they were.
Our independence has been stolen.
Kathy's lifetime career was in law enforcement. Bill traveled the world for business, and the couple has been married 40 years. But once the court put them under guardianship, they say they lost everything. They had no cell phones, no birth certificates, no passports.
Marriage license?
No more.
Driver's license?
None.
Social security card?
None.
No. You truly have none of the vital documents that people need to prove who they are in this life.
That's right.
In Bill's wallet, which is also gone.
I always had a picture of my wife and myself on our wedding day in the backseat of the limo.
All of it taken, they say, by private for-profit guardian April Parks, who came into the couple's life in the fall of 2013.
We were vulnerable at the time.
Bill is legally blind, but mentally all there. Multiple health problems put him in the hospital and then rehab, leaving Kathy alone at home with early signs of dementia. Healthcare workers called Parks, who had Kathy declared incompetent by a doctor from the Caremore Care Center, a place Parks uses frequently for her guardianship cases. All it takes is a 2-page form, a few check marks in some boxes, and a signature. Shortly thereafter, Bill was declared incompetent not by a doctor, but a physician's assistant named John Reyes, the same guy Parks used in Rennie North's case. When Parks took Kathy out of the couple's house and put her in a group home, Bill says she wouldn't tell him where his wife was.
Not having contact with my wife, I don't know where she is. I pray for her every day. I don't know if she's dead or alive.
Kathy, you must have been so scared.
I was.
After months, they were finally reunited.
And first thing she says to me is, Bill, I want to go home. There is no home. I want my pets. I want my dog. I want my Trudy. How do you deal with that?
During the guardianship process, the couple lost everything, including their beloved pets. The court never questioned any of it until after Contact 13 got involved. At that point, Bill was freed from guardianship and allowed to take over Kathy's care, but the Meslows believe the entire system failed them.
From Parks to every hearing master and judge who sanctioned and allowed her actions. They say Parks drained their bank accounts, their house, clothes, jewelry, keepsakes, and treasures from a 40-year marriage are mostly gone.
Our Christmases were unbelievable. We were one of those houses that lit up the block.
They lost cameras, home movies,
Even our dentures.
and even Kathy's parents' ashes, which were on the mantle of the home April Parks sold.
We were her property once she became our guardian. No different than a slave would have been. She owned and controlled anything and everything.
Parks sold the Meslows' home for $130,000. They say they never saw a dime of that money. Court records show everything in the house, from furniture to fixtures, was valued by Parks' appraisers at just under $6,000 and sold at a loss. Parks and her attorney charged the couple nearly $50,000 in guardianship and legal fees. Charges include $500 a month for filing, mail, and paying bills. Before the house was sold, Parks charged the couple $100 to take out the trash and $100 more to bring the cans back inside the next day. Bill was even charged $20 when he had to call Parks to ask her to put money in his group home account after she had let it run dry. Picking up the pieces of a life lost, Bill and Kathy Meslow have little more than memories.
Our lives are not what the golden years should be.
After Contact 13 began investigating this case and after Bill spoke to the Metro detective investigating Parks, a box appeared at the couple's group home with all their ID documents inside. Darcy Spears, Channel 13, Action News.